Welcome to Origins, the podcast that dives deep into the business of venture capital, where we learn how the people behind the capital, both GPs and LPs, make decisions. I'm Nick Chirls, GP at Asylum Ventures, an early-stage venture firm celebrating the creative act of building startups.
And I'm Beezer Clarkson, your LP co-host from Sapphire Partners, where we aim to invest in exceptional early-stage venture capital managers, both emerging and established franchise VCs. And Nick, happy 2026. I'm excited to be back with you. Brand new year of Origins.
We back. So this is going to be fun. We're starting the new year with something a little different here at Origins. We were fortunate to have some amazing guests on our show last year, some of the brightest minds in venture, AI, and investing. And as we look forward to 2026 and what that could hold for GPs and LPs, we wanted to do a compilation episode on their top thoughts and hot takes on the biggest trends from last year. The most obvious one being, can you guess?
Do you want me to?
The most obvious one being AI.
Well, I think this is awesome because, as I was saying off camera, not only did AI eat the world of venture last year, it's become a dominant conversation in the real world. And what's going to happen is going to be felt, I think, not just in our lovely little land of software, but everywhere in the world. Not to make it too big and meta from day one of 2026, but that's what's on my mind.
No, I think that's a good point. I mean, I think there's a conversation around what's happening around the financialization of AI and venture and financing of these companies and the data centers and the energy build out. It's hard to imagine ways in which AI does not have a very meaningful impact on our economy and labor and the real world. I can't think of a better person to start with than Sarah Tavel, someone who has changed her entire role, in fact, to living and breathing AI every day.
Oh, I totally agree. I've been such a fangirl of Sarah's for so long. And she was notably the first female GP at Benchmark. And then, as you said, last year decided to pivot to the role of venture partner and fully immerse herself in what's happening in the world of AI. And last fall, she joined us to talk about what it truly means to be AI native. And I'm just going to say, I have such great FOMO, envy, all the things, because I would love to do that for a month. But we'll just listen to Sarah talk about what she's doing.
You've written a bunch about this, and I love also that you're sort of exploring going down the depths of AI in collaboration with other people, which is like clear through a lot of your writing. How would you describe being AI native? We've talked some about like a consumer transformation, but also like how companies become AI native. And I know you've written a bunch about this, I think, with the CTO of Recce. I think this perception that every company now is trying to implement AI and AI their companies. And I'm curious, like, from your learnings and research, how and when you think companies will be successful doing that and what's required, and companies that may fall short or may give it lip service but fall short.
My interview that I have a blog post on, the AI metamorphosis, was so fascinating to me because it speaks to the limit of where you could go to if you're really becoming an AI native company. So like what I have seen is that there are a lot of companies that say, oh yeah, we're adopting AI. And what they mean is that like the CEO talks to ChatGPT every once in a while, just kind of like how they'd use Google, kind of query, like informational queries. And that the engineering team is using AI in some way to be more productive, whether they're sticking with GitHub or maybe going to Cursor or doing something else. It is isolated into pockets. And maybe you're saying, oh, we're going to adopt some AI vertical tools. And so again, it's like functional and siloed within an organization. And so they're getting productivity improvements, but there's not like a transformation. And like, what does a transformation look like? I think about, Toby from Shopify and Aaron Levy from Box and, the Recce team as an example, where the CEO spends the time to deeply immerse themselves. And a symptom, by the way, that I've noticed where a company thinks they've adopted AI, but they really don't, like the CEO hasn't, is often in their product roadmap. When they talk about the things that they want to build eventually with AI, there is a disconnect that you start to see very clearly between the companies that, like, the founders that really know, like, that have gone deep, that have experienced the jagged frontier, that they know the limitations and also how much change there is right now. You experience that there's like almost a shorter term product roadmap that emerges from the AI native founders, because they know that, like, it's just, you kind of have to maximize what's possible right now. You can't really anticipate what the next model is going to be capable of. Whereas I think that, like, the people who haven't, the CEOs who haven't really gone AI native themselves, like, haven't really invested the time, they, one, like in my, in conversations, I'll often be like, well, did you ask ChatGPT about that? Like, you can have these conversations with ChatGPT. And it's like, oh no, I didn't think to do that. Like, there is, like, I've heard someone say, you put a Post-it note on your screen that says, ask AI first. Like, you start there.
It's like that old meme. Let me Google that for you.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I want to double click on that actually. But let me come back to that, because I want to talk about the product roadmap part. Then the other thing with the founders who haven't really gone AI native is that they then produce product roadmaps that imagine what could be possible with AI without really understanding what's possible today. And it's kind of like they do the same type of road mapping that we're used to doing in a pre-AI world, where, like, everything's deterministic. It's just about, like, having the right ideas and executing on them. But with AI, there's a lot of things that are great demos, but to really know what's possible, you have to be so deep, and you have to just have very fast iteration cycles, because things change constantly. And then they tend to be, they're not taking advantage of what an LLM is capable of in the same way. And I just want to, Nick, go back to your point on, let me Google that for you, because I wrote a post about this, that I think the Google era trained us all to be self-reliant. The whole idea of let me Google that for you is like, you should be able to figure this out by yourself. Like, just Google it. And what ChatGPT is about is unwinding that self-reliance. Like, it's saying, don't be self-reliant. You don't have to figure out, you don't have to answer all these questions. You don't need to get all this done yourself. Just, like, dump something into ChatGPT and use it as a thought partner. Think of it as like an expert that you have access to that can guide you to the right place, instead of you having to, like, go through all these different websites to assemble what you think is an answer for something.
It requires some delegation.
Yes.
That
exactly.
Perhaps folks have not thought to delegate.
Like, that's exactly it. That's a big behavior change. And so the people who, you, as you're going through this learning curve, you have to unlearn the self-reliance, so that you do start to delegate, and you do start to think, wow, like, I could just dump this chat history into ChatGPT and it can tell me how I can communicate better, or, whatever the example is. It's why younger people are going to be better at using this than you and I are, because we grew up self-reliant with Google.
So maybe 2026 will truly be the end of let me Google that for you. I tend to not think that's the case, but what do you think, Beezer? Are you still Googling?
It's such an interesting question. If I have a question about how does something work, why does this work, or how does XYZ going to occur, I use sometimes it's ChatGPT, sometimes it's other AI-driven things. But if it's a specific, hey, how do I get to X? I need directions. Then I actually use DuckDuckGo, but I'll use a web browser because I know what I'm doing. Well, longtime USV fan, longtime privacy fan, gonna own it.
I'll tell you something interesting that happened to me is I was slowly migrating to ChatGPT for almost everything, both, like heavier weight uses and deep research, but also simple things that you normally Google. And I will say I noticed in the last quarter or two, shifting back to Google because Gemini is built into the search results now. And so another theme, we didn't talk about it that much last year, is just like the reemergence of Google.
You're totally right. When I use my phone, I'm relying really on Gemini. I perceive it to not be, but you're right. I think it is.
Next, we're going to hear from Mike Dauber and Sunil Dhaliwal, GPs at Amplify Partners. Amplify focuses on AI, cloud infrastructure, and data security, and Mike and Sunil talked with us about finding technical founders in AI in a very crowded marketplace. Let's hear what they have to say.
In this market, this strategy, I want to fill in the blanks on how I think it's working, but between the technical founders and people with new networks, is this just sort of like kid in a candy shop for you guys? Plus the being able to go early vis-a-vis all of the crazy big checks, or does it suck?
I mean, in this market, like I guess Sunil was alluded to, there's a little bit of competition of people looking for technical founders in AI right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've all seen the rumors of what Zuck is paying people. So I think that cat's a little out of the bag. But I still think the model that we run of looking for these types of founders, it still works. You're just competing with more people trying to do the same thing.
But if they aren't getting the same internal support to then go spend time with people in advance of starting companies, is that the same? Because you obviously see the competition in the numbers in the venture market and the concentration of dollars into companies. But I'm wondering if the game on the field is still different.
I believe if you get to founders early, before they start companies, you demonstrate belief and value to them before they start that business. You as a VC are in a pole position to do that deal when that founder actually starts the company. I think the thing has changed is we're in so much of a land grab right now in AI, and the money for some people has gotten so big that you can see these situations pivot very quickly. But I still think when we get to founders early, we win. And so our model really hasn't changed that much. And for the folks in our team that are focused in AI, right, I think they're having mostly a great time. I'm thinking of the personas internally and who would debate me on this. I think they're mostly having a great time because it's a very target-rich environment.
I think where it sucks though, Mike, is we still do this within our general context of investors, right? Our job is not. I wish if our job was just talent agency, my God, we would have so much fun. If we literally was just like find great people, match them to great projects, and like we did a great job for that person. Honestly, I think we would have even more fun if that's what we were. But the reality is our business actually hinges on whether or not we can make investments at a price that ultimately makes sense when you think about what the company will exit at some unknown number in the future. So
you want the price to make sense? Come on.
Check size and price, deals still matter. So where I think people are frustrated at the moment is if you're in a market that is obvious and capital rich, I think the easy result of that is anybody who's competing at the growth end of the market, their most natural move is like, this sucks. I keep losing. I want to go a little earlier and I want to go a little earlier. And so, the number of people right now that are willing to say like, I see the word OpenAI on your resume, or, you did your PhD under X or Y person. Yeah. How about $20 million to start your idea? And they're like, well, what are you going to use that for? And like, we're going to train something. What are you going to, why, what, how much? So like, there's a bunch of those where people we think are great and ideas we think are interesting, where at the end of the day, someone will just point a lot of capital at it at a way that doesn't make sense. Like that's the part that's probably not fun.
I think when there's more competition, it's a signal that you're in the right place and it's fun.
Oh no, I like it better when all those dynamics are great and the returns are there and people are like, I don't get it. And that's been us in so many markets that we've been in, is like, we were just doing stuff and people were like, that's cute. And then 5 years later, they're like, how do I get me some of that?
Up next is another favorite human of mine, Micah Rosenbloom, and his team at Founder Collective recently examined the trends that dominated the narrative when companies that are now household names, say OpenAI, were originally founded. The results were very interesting and showed how most venture investors are 7 years too late. Enjoy the listen.
We're just in one of these moments. And by the way, the capital's there. These people will raise money. So I think there's just some bad behavior throughout the channel. Not everybody. There's some great stuff that's going to be created. And we're not sitting it out, like I said. But it's just a hard time because there's a lot of capital chasing. It creates some bad behavior. It's a lot of momentum in FOMO investing. And I think unlike crypto, and Nick, you can speak way better to this than I can. I think crypto hit a certain segment of people who are interested in certain types of innovation and startups, sort of like economics and token economics, and there were some philosophical things. This is so broad, like from the dental industry to fintech, like AI does hit almost everything, I think. Now you could argue maybe crypto, but there's just, I think it's like the old saying, we overestimate what's going to happen in the short term and underestimate the long term. I think there's probably a lot of that going on right now.
I imagine you'd agree that if you look out 10, 15, 20 years, this technology is going to have tremendous impact on markets and companies and society and culture. I'm more thinking like within the little short-term cycles along the way, which I expect there to be.
Yeah.
Maybe one, do you think there'll be sort of peaks and troughs along the way? And then two, in this current peak, where do you think we are inning-wise?
I'm definitely, predicting markets is catching falling knives. Like you just can't do it.
I'll make it easier. I specifically predicted 7th inning at our AGM last week.
It's probably consensus now. There's going to be a correction at some point. The stock market's at an all-time high. Yesterday it dropped a bit, but I think it's back today. I think let me just pivot a little bit, which is, and Beezer, you've seen some of this research. We did this themes exercise where we said, what was the hot theme in the year a really valuable company was founded? And I looked up, so OpenAI was founded in 2015. What do you think the hot theme was that year? So we looked at Google searches and press hits.
Probably either consumer mobile apps or SaaS, vertical SaaS.
VR and AR.
Like
Everyone was talking about VR and AR.
Wow.
And so we did this analysis. And by the way, in 2008, it was mobile, like you were just saying. And when Anthropic got started, everyone was talking about Bored Apes. Like the basically the way this goes is on average, VCs and the trends are 7 years too late. I remember the Wired magazine about Uber saying transport tech is here. It was 7 or 8 years after Uber had been founded. And so VCs on average are wrong, or like 8 years too late, which is why I think
8 years too late for early stage investors.
For early stage investing. That's right. No, and that's a good point.
Yeah.
Because you might be able to momentum invest, and I think there are good momentum investors who get out at the right time. They get in and get out. And I think there's a lot of them fly under the radar. Beezer, you may have a better read on this too. Some who just know how to time the hype cycles. But as an early stage investor, I think if you're doing early AI right now, we probably, including ourselves, and by the way, we're in Suno, we're in a bunch of stuff that are in these categories. But I think on average, we're probably late. A lot of the investors. I mean, I think back to Shield AI. It had AI in the name. We invested in that company 10 years ago. No one was talking about defense tech. It was sort of like autonomous drones using AI. And that was a decade ago.
Oh, I have so many questions. I'm going to start with one and we can go to any of them, but how you find these companies? Because I'm trying to find spicy ways of you and two not agreeing on everything, but I think you're going to.
Yeah.
There's something about the weird is wonderful, which is, I'm kind of copying your phrase there, but you found these things before they're popular. Because now, we see a defense/deep tech fund, 1 or 2 pitches per week, which is the LP version of what you all get.
By the way, Beezer, remember the Google Glass Fund, all these clean tech funds.
Oh, yeah.
Where are they now?
Facebook fund.
Yeah,
the Facebook app fund.
So, and you guys both do this. You manage to find things when they're not, I'm going to use the stereotypical phrase, when they're not conventional, because that's the job of the earliest stage checks. And how are you doing it today? Because today's market is tricky, right? There's all these things that you're seeing. And I can tell you, it's sort of a weird bull market from an LP perspective, because on one hand, the stock market's super high up, but it's not the typical bull market that has distributions flowing, right? So, and it's highly concentrated in a certain number of companies. So it's bullish if you're certain places, but it's bearish if you're sitting in a bunch of others. So it's weird in LP land.
I do agree with your description around how crypto touched some things. And I do think that the number of companies that we meet in terms of AI concentration is as concentrated or more concentrated than any cycle I've seen previously over the last 15, 20 years, because it does touch everyone can figure out a way to work it into the deck or the pitch or whatever. And so on the one hand, you can go make an extra effort to go find all the other things that are not AI. But I also think that there is something very real where it has taken talent away. I mean, the downside of this is that it is distributed talent away from other interesting areas or categories that people could be working in. And then even in startups, there's a crazy talent distribution because every founder wants to do their own AI startup. So I do think it is a challenging time for an early stage investor, even if you're not looking at AI stuff.
But I do think it's one of the benefits of being in New York and Boston and not in the Valley. Like, I think now there are a lot of benefits to being in the Valley right now. But I think one of the benefits is like not everybody in New York and Boston and outside of the Valley is chasing exactly the same stuff. Whereas I think there's much more concentration there. And I think you can just think more clearly and be like, wait a second, like, is this actually rational or is this just like a lot of FOMO investing? I do think a lot of great talent is being siphoned off, but I think it's also attracting, like, I think being a VC now feels way less cool than doing a startup again, which is good. Like, I think entrepreneurship is like, I think like at an all-time peak, at least anecdotally, it feels like this is the moment. Like, I mean, candidly, like I see 20-year-olds and 50-year-olds pitching businesses now because they're like, oh my God, like there's this new set of tools. And I think in general, that's good. I think, to the point of like, how do you find these things? I think it's so much of letting the founders take you on the journey and not having a preordained theme that we're chasing or try to be, very open-minded to like whatever weird thing these guys want to do. Like, we're going to see if they can convince us they can build a business. And, my example of this right now also probably be in the LP deck. We made 3 investments in HVAC in the last 2 years. One is a software company. One is actually a new way to do HVAC, and one is a water heater company. Those were 2 different partners. And we didn't even realize the overlap. They're not competitive, obviously. It's the 3 different things. We didn't realize, we're like, oh my God. Like, like I said to the team, are we overweight HVAC? Like, and then, like we didn't even know that we were like,
I think it's clear that you need a specialized dedicated HVAC fund.
I'm going to pitch Beezer, the $1 billion HVAC fund next week.
Okay. No joke. We get AI roll-up decks and they have HVAC in them.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Because you're going to speak to it better than I do. It is an industry that needs a little software loving. That's all I can say.
Totally.
Just because AI has been dominating the narrative doesn't mean it will eventually be ubiquitous. Zach Weinberg, the founder of CuriBio, shared with us some things AI can't do in the world of biotech.
You've talked about AI and the consumer behavior. Curious in a synthesized way how you're seeing this play out in biotech. And bit of context, we have a number of our funds who are looking at bringing AI and tech from the tooling standpoint, right, into biotech. And then I'd be curious how you're seeing it happen. And maybe I'm wrong, but I'm assuming you're seeing it from the engineering standpoint, or maybe not. Maybe it's just at the consumer level, and we'll get smarter about how we think about the world.
The short answer is, if you think about biotech as like, a 30-step process, and in each one of those steps, there is a physical experiment that you have to run in a lab, and you have to look at the results, and then you have to interpret those results to figure out what you want to do next. And if you think about AI, what is it really doing? It's a prediction machine. And one of the benefits of AI in like a full digital world, coding, image generation, predicting what you want to type next, is that feedback loop is immediate and really high quality and scaled, right? Like, do you know how many chat GPT images were probably generated in the last 3 weeks? I don't know, like 4 billion would be my guess. And so you just get these like incredible tight feedback loops. In biotech, you don't have those, right? So even if, the computer makes a prediction, you got to go make it. And then you got to loop back. And so there's a real challenge in just like the impact here is extremely difficult in a physical world because there's that cycle is really, really, really hard. The other thing is the training data for these models. the training data for LLMs in the digital world is every written word of every person in the history of humanity of all time. And now we're making new training data sets. It's insane. And the training data set in biotech tends to be like stuff generated in a lab on a petri dish, which is a piece of plastic. It's not a body. It's not a human body.
And by the way, all those data sets are highly protected inside of pharma and organizations that are, it's not Reddit.
Correct. I think there's pieces of that 30-step process that AI will be wonderful for and will cut costs and will make scientists more productive. Obviously, the AlphaFold stuff is probably the biggest, right? So, predicting the shape of proteins, that is super valuable. There's some limitations to it, but, it's way better than the tools we had before, and you use it in combination with other stuff. So I would say like, great, net positive, glad to have it. We use the tools where they're relevant. I think this idea of like the computer is going to tell you the drug is just fantasy and not real. And even in the one rare case where maybe that happens, it's never going to be exactly like that. The repeatability of that is probably impossible. And a lot of this has to just do with like the training data and the fact that biology is hard. And I just I don't want my soapbox for one last second. Why? Because we barely know how a cell works in the first place. For me, it's interesting because I kind of came from the outside. I read the New York Times headlines. The amount that we don't know about how the human body works relative to what we do know is like 1 billion times larger what we don't know than what we do. And it always feels cool like we're making all these progress because we are making lots of progress, but like we're starting at the bottom here, right? Like, we didn't have physicians like washing their hands before surgery until 80 years ago. It's like, this is pretty new. Until 20 years ago, we thought that like, that's it, DNA. We can sequence DNA. That's going to tell us everything about how the body works. Not true. Simply not true. So it's a way more complicated system than I think anybody ever realized. And if you don't understand it, it's hard to build models on top of it, right? Because like the training data just like doesn't really exist at the scale that you need and at the accuracy that you need and the repeatability that you need. So most of the AI companies in biotech, I think they're cool and interesting, but a lot of them are like generating their own training data, like, which means like machines and lab space and people and pipettes and sequencers and like it's really expensive. And you're still generating this much training data kind of like relative to what, like just Google has training on YouTube. I think AI's impact in healthcare will be materially bigger in healthcare services, meaning like when you go to your doctor.
And all the administration around that.
Yes. A little bit of an arms race between, insurance and doctor, but yeah, absolutely. That's for sure. So good, but by no means a panacea. I'm glad to have it, but we got a lot more to go.
You're going to be able to keep your job for a few more years.
300 years. Like we are nowhere close. We are nowhere close.
Since I personally clearly cannot get enough of Sarah or the wisdom she shared in her episode, and P.S., it was one of the most listened to that we had last year, let's bookend with one final thought from her. She shared some great insight about looking for technical genius versus product genius in a founder that I think should be or will be invaluable for VCs searching for the next AI breakout.
Given all these thoughts and what you're seeing happening, have you made new investment decisions over the last handful of months guided by some of this? And prepared mind isn't the right word, but you're because that's cliched and kind of hate using cliches. But how is that informing what you're either responding to or maybe looking for?
All my writing is about nurturing a prepared mind. And certainly like I wrote a post about, I think I called it 100x and cheaper, just how one of the incredible things about AI, this is part of like the superpowers that I described, is that, it used to be there's some things that often require hiring a human that you just don't even think to do because it's so much work. It's so expensive to do. And now suddenly like you can use AI to create a video for your project that you're working on. Or, my daughter loves to ask for herself riding as a princess riding a unicorn, or like, all these things where what used to be so prohibitively expensive or time consuming to do, now is possible almost instantly with AI. And so you think about like making videos, making images, having a cooking coach or a fitness coach or a therapist, or all these things where you can deliver this like 100x better experience cheaper to the consumer. That is a fundamental opportunity that we're going to see so many companies emerge. In Benchmark's portfolio, we have companies like DeepL on the translation side, HeyGen on the video kind of avatar side. There's a great assortment there. And then I also think about where we are from a consumer perspective on creating new consumer experiences. And just like the early days of the web era, and you had a company like Google that really catalyzed. I mean, Yahoo was preceded Google, but I feel like Google, Yahoo was the director. Google like opened the web up, and it was a very technical, highly technical team. Like if you think about the product that Google created, I kind of have been talking about things on the spectrum of like technical genius to product genius, right? And I think what happens is that in the beginning of a new era, we have companies who have to be a technical genius founder in order to create a company in that space, because none of the infrastructure exists, none of the ecosystem. Like, there's so many things, there's so much technical work that has to happen in order to make an experience for an end consumer possible, that you have to have, your brain is like the technical genius, and then the product experience itself is like a text box, right? And then you over time, what happened in the web era or the internet era is that as the ecosystem matured and filled in, you started to have CDNs, you had AWS and S3, you had all types of open source emerge that made it so much easier for a founder who wasn't necessarily highly technical themselves to build something that could scale. And then as it matures, you get to companies like Pinterest, where I was, or Instagram, or Discord, or Snap, where the founders weren't technical at all. Some of them didn't even know how to code, right? And that was all product genius. Like those people, they were product geniuses. They knew how to build social systems and networks. They had a very different part of the brain that was able to come alive. And if you think about Facebook, even, before Facebook was MySpace and Friendster, those companies, MySpace and Friendster, I think were just too early for the team that they had for where the tech ecosystem was, the infrastructure around them. So they couldn't scale. So now fast forward to AI, the early consumer wins were ChatGPT, which is, a copy and paste to me of Google in some ways. It's like 99.9% genius on the back end, like to create this magical, simple experience on the front end that's just a text box. Character AI was not that different. Noam is a technical genius. And if you had a product conversation with him about what he was doing at Character AI, the conversation was about the model, And then as the ecosystem matures, and by the way, this is going to happen a lot faster in AI because there's so much more venture dollars. There's so much more already that's been built out. Like, we don't have to wait. I don't remember how many years it was for AWS. Like we have, Fireworks as an example, another benchmark company, to kind of make it really, really easy for people to build these types of companies. But it's still
and a lot of
early.
open source.
And a lot of open source. But it's moving so quickly that I think you still have to be highly, highly technical to build a new consumer experience. And it's going to be some, Perplexity was kind of a little bit like the next generation of, they weren't building their own models, but they are very, very deeply, deeply technical. And then it kind of will mature from here. So that maybe is another part of my prepared mind, which is like I'm far more biased right now to like highly technical founders building in this space, because I think you still need that skill set.
How do you look at frontier AI companies and the businesses around them? there's like very healthy debate in the venture community. Obviously, valuations are very healthy for many of these companies, and the multiples are, 50x, 100x in some cases. There's debates on, companies that are reselling inference, and even the foundation models themselves in terms of like the depreciation of their models. And, does all the profit ultimately accrue to NVIDIA? This doesn't necessarily need to Benchmark's view, but your personal view and just how you think about how each of the companies that you invest in might actually accrue value.
We've always, and this is a benchmark bias, which is that whoever owns the user, the developer, is where the value accrues. And what I'll say is that opinions on this question have a very short half-life because things are changing so quickly. And it wasn't that long ago when we thought of OpenAI and Anthropic similarly, like these B2B businesses and an API for developers, and it was all about that. And now we all realize like the obviousness, which is that OpenAI has become largely a consumer company. Now, 6 months from now, that could look totally different. When I thought through the thought experiment of your OpenAI, your Anthropic, you have raised tremendous amounts of money to make these investments in the next frontier of a model. You don't want to be commoditized, right? Like these guys, you have to assume these CEOs, founders, the executive teams of these companies are brilliant, and they are. And they're strategists. And what naturally follows is that they were going to move up the stack, right? And so they weren't going to be satisfied just being an API for a third-party tool, that they were going to, over time, move up the stack so that they would own the developer, the user, whoever it is. And we're seeing that play out now, right? You have Codex, you have Cloud Code. So I think about the economic value that happens when we unbound coding. And that is just there's no ceiling to what that opportunity looks like. And so that is an area where we're going to see a ton of investment over time. It's going to be incredibly competitive. And who owns a developer? How do they, divide and conquer the space? I would be deluding myself if I thought I had a prediction there. And then there's going to be other parts of the stack. There's going to be new parts that emerge. I think this is a time of strong opinions loosely held.
And it does feel like assumptions and frameworks have to get updated. Maybe not daily, but weekly, monthly.
I remember when DeepSeek happened. Again, everything we thought we knew changed. And then it felt like that for a week, and then it stopped. Maybe, but like these things, the amount of competition is so tremendous that like you and I, the three of us, like everybody who is the end user, we are experiencing. It reminds me of like when DoorDash and Uber Eats were competing, and it was it was 2 minutes late, and you got your whole thing refunded because there was such a competitive time. Like every new model comes out and then the old models get depreciated so much, like the price of them goes down so much. We are all beneficiaries right now of this intense competition.
Sarah, I could listen to you explain the world to me all day long. So I'm just going to say that. Thank you.
It's fun to talk about these things right now.
So Nick, now that we have all this advice from our guests ringing in our ears, what do you think VCs should keep an eye out for this year in the world of AI? Simple question. Have fun.
Oh, man. I don't think I fully was expecting this one. I think the big topic in venture this year will be what's the forcing function that forces the market to maybe take a pause or a cool down period. Something that's just top of mind for me personally is, how do we participate in the market, but not get over our skis? Because I do think there will be a period where we press pause and really try to understand like what is the durability of these companies and are they actually good businesses and which ones are and which ones aren't. My guess is that some of the big IPOs this year also mark the market top. So I think perhaps Anthropic and OpenAI going public, SpaceX going public, I would bet that those moments are probably somewhere close to the top of the market.
And when you say top of the market, do you mean an AI venture funding top of the market?
Primarily AI, but most of venture is now going into AI. So I think you could probably extrapolate that means like more broadly top of the market. I'm not suggesting we go into some like post.com, darkness for many years, but I think we have to take a pause at some moment and try to understand, are these companies actually durable businesses?
After sitting through numerous end of year investor meetings, LPACs, sort of late in the year AGMs, and also marrying with that some of the general like real world market commentary, right, from non-venture worlds, but major banking institutions and things like that, there is definitely a question about what's really happening when enterprises adopt this, and what does that mean for workforces? What does it mean for product rollouts? We'll see what happens. I mean, I would like to be optimistic because I would rather not be in some apocalyptic bear market. I would like 2026 to be much more sunshine and roses, but we'll find out.
Thanks for listening to Origins, the show where we discuss the venture ecosystem through the lens of myself, a GP, and Beezer, an LP.
We're excited to unveil a brand new season in 2026. Keep an eye out for more by following Nick and I, as well as OpenLP on X and LinkedIn.
And while you're there, please rate and review the podcast. It's super helpful for other folks looking for venture insights to find our show, so please do it. I'm Nick Chirls.
And I'm Beezer Clarkson. And we'll be back soon. Thanks for listening.